Welcome to Masterclass here to Mind for All Seasons. I'm excited for our topic this week. We are here with special guest Morry Zelcovitch, who is, I think, the world's only brainwave entrainment engineer. And he has quite a story. As a child, he heard lots of voices in his head, and he had a hard time getting rid of those voices. He also experienced significant depression, and it had a real impact on the quality of his life, as you can imagine. But over time, he noticed that during certain periods, time would sort of speed up, and during other periods, time would go really slow, and it was painful. And he noticed that when things were working better, there was more coherent sound in his environment, and he started recognizing that noises affected him in significant ways. And as he paid more attention to that, he became introduced to the principle of entrainment. And some of you are familiar with entrainment. It's the idea that when you subject the brain to steady impulses of light or sound for 3 to 5 minutes or longer, that brainwave patterns will start to keep pace with the input. And as Morry became familiar with the idea of entrainment, he realized that some people were getting really good results with the technique, and other people weren't. And he was one that wasn't getting as significant a results as he thought possible. So he went off and he started training and studying with the world's top expert in audiovisual entrainment, Dave Seaver. Now, those of you who have been in our AmFast community for a long time may recall a masterclass a couple of years ago with Dave Seaver. He came on and he presented to the group. Morry trained with Dave for I don't know how long. Morry will fill that in as we go forward. But he has now taken all of that knowledge and spent years bringing the principle of entrainment to thousands of people all over the country. He's mentioned in one of Dr. Dale Bredesen's books as having a technique that's really beneficial for the brain. And so I'm excited to dive in with Morry and talk about everything from how entrainment can help with anxiety and depression to sleep, to focus and concentration and other mood-related issues. And this isn't magic. This is actually a principle of neuroscience. We're going to have basically a conversation. We're not going to have formal slides. Morry and I are going to talk through some of these principles. I'll ask him some questions. But as he shares and as we have this conversation, I want you to drop questions that you have in the chat. And we'll address those as we go along or at the end of all of this. So, Morry, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. And I've had the pleasure of having a number of really good conversations with you. I've learned a lot from those. And one of the things that I've learned is that you're just a genuinely good human being. You're very kind-hearted. You truly want to make a difference for people. And I'm grateful that you would take time out of your busy day to come and be with us. When someone asks you, well, actually, I want to back up. When it comes to your background, can you tell us a little bit more about your journey at the point that you started working with Dave Seaver? What were some of the first aha moments that you had there that helped you really understand and appreciate what entrainment is? And if you could put that in the context of, hey, this is a group of people that have varying insight into exactly what the principle of entrainment is. If you can help us understand that as you talk about your journey, that would be great.
Sure. So the very first thing, I don't remember ever not being depressed or suicidal for that matter. I tried to end my life at least 6 times that I can remember. Might have been a lot more, a lot of self-harm. I've broken pretty much every bone in my body at least once, dislocated everything that can dislocate, even a few things that aren't supposed to dislocate. Um, Life was a misery. Look wherever you are at a dark spot, a black area. That was a bright sunny day for me. And if something happened that I perceived as bad, then what would happen is it would get even darker, and I'd go into what I call a super depression. That would last between 3 to 6 weeks. I'd dig myself out of that back into the regular darkness, and that was my life. I actually thought everybody was like me. because I faked smiling, I faked laughing, I faked having friends, all the kind of stuff that everybody else did. I thought they were all faking it too. So I never complained to anybody. I never, saw a doctor about it until I started realizing that things aren't supposed to be like this, that feeling bad is a kind of like a red light on the dashboard of your life. It's telling you there's something amiss. And if it's a warning, then it's a warning for a reason because maybe there's something I can do about it. I was camping with some friends, and back then I was a drug addict. I was smoking a lot of marijuana and doing other drugs and alcohol as well. And up until that point, I had never experienced time flying, only crawling. And the only way I could sleep is if I smoked a really big joint. So every single night before I'd go to sleep, I'd smoke a very big joint. And I'm sitting around the campfire by myself. Everybody else has already gone to bed. And I rolled myself the joint and I thought, well, this should take about half an hour to smoke. So you can imagine how big it is if it's taken that long to smoke. And when it was done, it was 4.5, 5 hours later. And I was blown away. I was actually very scared at first because there's a totally new experience to have time fly. But then I got very excited because I made the connection that I wasn't thinking my depressive thoughts. I wasn't thinking about how horrible life is. And I started trying to piece together what it was about my environment that made me feel better. And I thought it might be the flickering flames, but I wasn't actually looking. I had my head in my hands most of the time. I kind of pieced together that it was the crackling of the wood, pop, 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 snap, crackle, pop. And that made me really excited. And I couldn't wait for the weekend to end so I could go to what I call the paper internet. Can anybody guess what I mean by the paper internet? Library. Back in those days, they didn't have the internet. So I'd go to the paper internet. And I remember I was reading neurological journals and neuroscience articles and quantum physics, perception, psychology, anything I could find that might explain why I was feeling the way I felt. My parents were okay. They didn't beat me. We weren't rich or anything, so I didn't have all the toys and the bells and whistles that all my friends had. But I always had food, I always had clothes. I had no reason to feel the way I felt, and yet I still felt that way. So by spending all this time looking for ways to help myself, I tried things like electroshock, various types of doctors, homeopathy, hypnosis, meditation. Nothing seemed to work for me, and I couldn't figure it out. So I decided I need to learn about my brain. Because that's where all the pain was. I could feel it here. And I started learning about the brain as much as I could. And by getting an understanding, because I don't actually believe in fact or truth, I believe in current understanding. That's what I truly think science is. I think it's a way to understand things. And when we understand things, it makes it easier, it removes fear, but it also leaves our mind open to learning new things. And that to me is the most important thing. Because the minute I started thinking I knew something, I would prove myself wrong and it would bite me on the you know where all the time. Adopting the philosophy that there is no truth, at least in my experience, allowed me to continually learn, and I still learn. I still feel the same way. So, because of that experience on the camping trip and then coming back, I eventually came across, because I started researching the effect of sound, that naturally led me to entrainment, which naturally led me to David Seaver. I went to get trained through David. I don't know if he still offers it, but he used to have a class. And I went there and I learned all the basics that I needed to learn. And the interesting thing was, the first time I ran a session using his David device, I was scared. I don't know about the rest of you, but I was scared the first time. I didn't know. What if it doesn't do anything? What if it does work and makes it worse? These were all concerns that I thought were legitimate, but they were really my depression just rearing its ugly head. Because often when we try something new, it's scary. Why is it scary? Why isn't it exciting? Because exciting and scary are exactly the same emotion. It just depends on how we choose to interpret it. So when I ran the session, again, I experienced the time dilation. It was a half-hour session. It felt like 5 minutes. It was beautiful. And that's really what got me started. That's what got me going. And that's what started me on the road of understanding and creating brand new ways of doing things that haven't been thought of before, or at least haven't been thought of in the general public's domain, to help me to help myself, and then by extension to help others to help themselves too.
What a fascinating journey, Morry, and it's amazing. Probably, I mean, you can tell me how you feel about it, but I can only imagine what it must be like to look back and to see what a dark place you were in, and to recognize that somewhere in that darkness, you had the presence of mind to recognize the experience at the campfire and that something was different and that you were motivated to dig. That to me is remarkable. I've met lots of people who have experienced a variety of mental health challenges, and to have that level of presence of mind to recognize the difference while in the midst of the trial, that's really unique.
I appreciate that, but someone once told me there is no courage where there is no choice. And I really had no choice. Because, like I said, I tried to kill myself and I was lousy at it.
Mm.
So, when I couldn't find a way to die, I had to find a way to live.
So kind of do or die. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things that I learned many years ago when I was first learning about audiovisual entrainment, I, I think might be helpful in laying some further context here. It was the idea that when radar first came into being, radar operators started falling asleep at the screen. And radar was an army thing. It was used in the army. And if you're in the military service and you're falling asleep on the job, it's not a good thing. So when this started happening over and over, the military realized we got to figure this out. And that was the discovery that, oh, the radar screen flashes at about a delta wave frequency, and that's one of the frequencies involved in sleep. And that was, to my knowledge, sort of the beginning of understanding that if you subject the brain to pulses of light for long enough, 3 to 5 minutes or longer, that the brain will start to keep pace with that. So when I heard that, I thought, oh, it's kind of like entrainment is like a pacemaker for the brain. Kind of like you have a pacemaker for a heart that's out of rhythm, and entrainment sort of gets your brain back into a specific rhythm. But you could speed it up, you could slow it down, you could use pulses of light, you could use pulses of sound, you could use mild electrical stimulation. Does that jive with your understanding and your explanation of entrainment and how it works, Morry, or what would you add to that?
Yeah. It's all energy. Everything is energy and everything is vibration. So, if you put your fingers on your throat and you just hum or you talk at all or you make any kind of noise, you'll feel vibration. So, sound doesn't actually exist. Everybody's used to hearing things, so they assume sound exists. Sound is nothing more than the brain's way of translating vibration into something meaningful. So there's that old riddle, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, does it make a noise? The answer is no. If someone is there to hear it, does it make a noise? The answer is still no. So now you all can impress people at parties because you have the clue to this. And the reason is because you need to have something that can read the vibration and then translate it into what we call sound. If all of you could hear my voice and record it the way you hear it, my voice will sound slightly different in each recording because that denotes the difference between how your brain deals with that. So entrainment is beautiful, and it was beautiful for me especially because it doesn't matter whether you believe in it or not. If any of you have ever listened to music, and I am expecting, yes, everybody listens to music or has listened to music in their lives, have you ever bopped your head and tapped your toes without actually consciously trying to do that? Congratulations, you've just proved to yourself that entrainment exists. What we're doing is we're entraining the neurons, the CPU of your life, the central processing unit of your life, which is your brain. The beautiful thing is your brain will follow frequencies, pulse tones, pulsed lights. And by doing so, we can encourage it to get into different states because depending on the state that is in, and when you've heard of alpha and delta and beta and theta and gamma, That's just a way of describing how many times a second the light switch flicks on and off in a second. That's really all that means. But the nature of the beast is that when our brain and our neurons are pulsing at these frequencies, it releases different kinds of chemistry. And that chemistry is actually the way we interpret our surroundings and the way we interpret what's happening to us. There's biological mechanisms too. There's current research showing that fast oscillations in the gamma frequency may be helpful in even clearing various garbage products, waste products from the brain. But what's more important to understand is that your emotions, the way you feel, the quality of your sleep, all of this is dependent on the kind of chemistry that your brain produces. With brainwave entrainment, audio entrainment, visual entrainment, we can influence the actual chemistry that's being produced. By influencing and changing the chemistry, we change how we feel. We change how we perceive things. We change how we act and react. And that's the real benefit with entrainment, because entrainment doesn't require belief on the part of the user. It doesn't require anything. Just sit there, lay down, have your perceived nap for 30 minutes. There's nothing to read, there's nothing to study, there's nothing to do. It turned my life around, and I believe anyone who uses it in as an ambient system, so in the background, or consciously and with intention, laying down with headphones, can get massive benefits, not because the entrainment's magic, but because your brain is. And the entrainment helps the brain to relearn, if you will, healthful states and dominant states that actually allow us to experience life differently. I was depressed for 40 years. I didn't think there was any other way. I ran a recording I did for 5 minutes. I felt a difference. That made me think, hey, maybe I don't have to feel this way all the time. That's all it takes sometimes is a little bit of hope because of a little bit of experience. Does that help?
Mm. Yeah, that helps a lot. And I love the concept that you don't have to believe it. You don't even have to see anything to experience that it works. That's like a lot of other things. Who would have thought that there were all of these wavelengths of light floating around in our world that we cannot see with the naked eye? And yet, if we tune into them using specific devices, that we can transmit information. Radio waves existed before the radio was developed to be able to pick up on them, and then we all know what it's like to be driving along and to tune in to the radio and have someone deliberately deliberately transmitting those frequencies of light, and we pick up on it, and we're getting information. Um, the fact that nobody knew that those wavelengths of light existed until the last couple hundred years or so, that's amazing. You can think of generations of humans that had no idea, but that didn't mean that it was not real. It was just there. They didn't perceive it. So you're talking about something that's very similar to that. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
there are some really good comments here, or questions. Ronald says, when I sing or hum or whistle a favorite music tune to myself over and over, can that be a form of entrainment? What's your thought about that, Maury?
It's not pure entrainment, but yeah, it's definitely entrainment. And the reason why I believe you're actually singing or humming the same song over and over again is because, in a sense, you've been entrained to it. There's a beat frequency in all music. And sometimes that beat speeds up and it slows down in the music. But if you're repeating it over and over and over again, then you are in a form, not just in a state of entrainment already, but you're also encouraging that state to keep going. That you're probably feeling the neural chemistry and it feels good. And you're noticing, whether you're aware of it or not, that by humming or singing, you're perpetuating that good feeling. And again, that good feeling is purely the result of neural chemistry, which is produced by brainwave activity. So your humming and your singing is creating the activity, which then creates the chemistry, which then creates the feeling that you want to feel more of. So you sing more of the song, and it kind of goes around in a pleasant circle. I've never
Yeah.
heard it described like that before, but that makes perfect sense to me. Yes.
Yeah, that's helpful. So to follow up on that, Maury, what would be the difference between what you called pure entrainment and this example of humming or whistling the same thing over and over?
So pure entrainment is if you can be in a isolated, like almost like a soundproof booth, and all you're hearing is the pulse tones, bum,
Hmm.
bum, 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 then there's less distraction. Everything you do, believe it or not, I'm holding my head up. So I'm not leaning on anything. You're holding your head up. Most of you look like you're all holding your head up. That is neurological responses that are sending electrical activity to those muscles and joints in the neck to hold it up, saying command, strain here, stress here, tighten here, so Maury's head doesn't do this. That's creating brainwave activity. That's communication that's happening. With pure entrainment, you're limiting that extraneous noise, if you will, the static, so that you're more able to gain a positive, pure influence with nothing else getting in the way. So with entrainment, you should never drive because it can be distracting and it can alter how you perceive things, doing anything dangerous. But if you want to get the best, purest results, laying down ordinary stereo headphones, eyes closed, is probably the best way to do it. However, the beautiful thing about entrainment is it's not necessary that you get pure entrainment all the time. You can have it as a subtle nuance in the background too. And that allows you to go into these states on a more subtle level, but it also allows you to be in these states for longer periods of time. So there's a lot of advantages. Entrainment allows us the flexibility to figure out a way that anyone and everyone can be influenced by it. I'm even working on tactile entrainment right now. So what if someone doesn't like the sound? I'm working on a way of tactile entrainment where they wear sensors and activators on their palms of their hands. And that actually, because that's a very high nerve concentration, and that actually sends the information to the brain, much like the ear does, and the bones is adjacent. So there's more than one way to skin a cat, so to speak, and entrainment is kind of a universal operator when it comes to it because it's very adaptable and it can pretty much help everybody who has a brain.
Hmm. Well, that's a great overview of the many different ways that entrainment could affect someone. Before meeting you, Maury, I had no idea that you might be able to activate the principle of entrainment with the hands.
Yeah,
That's amazing. But it makes sense to me because there are thousands of mechanoreceptors in the fingertips, and they stimulate the language center of the brain. So we know everything connects back to the brain in the body.
yeah.
Rochelle says, if you could listen to anything on your headphones, what would it be? Music, just tones, something else?
So for me, like if you're asking a personal question as far as preference is concerned, I prefer to listen to entrainment with a background hiss. I created, when I do my recordings, I created a background sound. It's kind of like white noise. Shh. It's 600 different frequencies laid over top of each other one at a time. Most of them are there simply to act like a mask. So they're there to block external noises so it doesn't disrupt your system. Because remember, I said that even holding your head up creates stimulation, which affects brainwave activity. So it's in competition. Same thing with other sounds. So other sounds you might hear will also have an influence. But when it comes to my personal preference, I like the shh and I like the pulse tones. Pure pulse tones, I find them, which is funny because it's kind of like a very subtle MRI, blah, 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 blah. It's not annoying. It's not big. You would think you would get used to it. You would think it would get annoying. You would think it would get repetitive. But because it helps to mimic natural processes in your own head, in your own brain, your neurons, because that's what your neurons do. That's all they do is they're like a light switch flicking on and off every second. And because it's such a natural process, funny enough, people don't get bored. They don't, I could sing a song. I remember when the sitcom Friends was out. I loved that theme song. I just played it to death. And I haven't heard that song in almost 20 years now because I played it so much I got sick of it. Entrainment, I still listen to tracks I created 25 years ago, and it you don't get used to it. It's like getting used to breathing or getting used to eating. You don't get less of an effect simply because you've been doing it for years and decades.
Hmm. That's an interesting way to think about it, but it makes sense to me. If you're listening to something that's really in sync with a brain that's operating smoothly and well, then it just feels like a well-oiled machine, and that feels good anytime you do it.
That's 100% true. And the thing is, even when the machine isn't that well oiled, I notice that when I'm fragmented, when I'm having a hard time concentrating, when my brain is, they call it scatterbrain, thoughts
Mm.
firing off in every which way, that listening to a session, this is what I call it when I listen to my sessions, and I listen like 3 or 4 times a day. So when I listen to a session, I find it brings me back, it coalesces everything. The fragmentation disappears. I become more creative. I become more intuitive. I'm easier to understand what's happening around me as opposed to panicking about something that might be happening around me.
Mhm. So we've talked a little bit about entrainment and what it is, that it's kind of like a pacemaker for the brain. We've talked about your journey of discovery that led you to a place of healing. Tell us a little bit more about the transition outward. What led to starting to help other people, and how has that changed over time? And maybe walk us up to what kinds of things you do for people nowadays.
Sure. So when I started, somehow I had friends. I have no idea how I had friends. I guess I was pretending pretty well. I was kind of like the class clown. That happens, when you're depressed, right? You want to try to force laughter. You want to make everybody else laugh. You want to be the entertainer. So when I designed my first recording after I got back from my training with David, I tried it and it didn't seem to do anything, except one of my conditions, one of my issues was thousands of voices in my head. So I had these thousands of voices in my head. When I had finished listening, I didn't even realize it, but they were all gone. For about 5 minutes, they were gone, and I didn't even notice they were gone until after they started coming back. 5 minutes doesn't sound like a long time, but when you've gone your entire life without and you're always hearing them, 5 minutes is amazing. I didn't even know what was happening at first. So what happened was, as I started listening to this recording and designing other recordings, because I got very excited, some of my friends were saying, Morry, there's something different about you. You just seem more relaxed, less intense. What are you doing? It's great. And I said, well, I made this 30-minute recording and I've been listening to it like 3, 4, 5 times a day. And they asked if they could try it. So I gave it to them and they tried it. This is back in the days of cassettes. For those of you that don't know what a cassette is, look it up. But yeah, so they got back to me and they said, this thing's amazing. I'm sleeping better. I learn quicker, blah, 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 blah. And I thought they were just blowing smoke. They were happy a friend of theirs is feeling better and they were trying to be supportive. Then I started getting phone calls from people I don't know because my friends gave it to friends of theirs who I don't know. And they were asking me, hey, Bob gave me this, Sue gave me this. Can you tell me what it is? Because I'm sleeping better. I don't have negative thoughts like I used to have. All these different things were going on. That made me realize that this might be more than just for me. Because originally, when I was designing all these things, I was being very selfish. It was just for me. Because I thought I was the only person in the world who was going through these things. Some of these people who tried it, though, didn't have issues. They had lots of money, they had good families, they had this, they had that, and they were getting benefits too. Like even people who didn't have issues were getting benefits. And it just kept snowballing from there and snowballing from there. Dr. Bredesen is an interesting story. Do we have a second that I can get into that?
Yeah, before you do, though, I
Sure.
want to ask a quick little follow-up to something that you said. Your friends started experimenting with this track that you created, and
Yeah.
even those who didn't have any sort of mental health challenge to speak of were seeing benefits. What kinds of things were they reporting? If you were to describe the specific benefits, what kinds of things are we talking about?
Well, a couple of them got raises at their job that were unexpected. And they were told it's because they're getting their work done more efficiently with less mistakes.
Hmm.
And the time period was exactly within about 2 months of them using these recordings. So that was pretty impressive. A couple of them had sleeping issues. Like they were fine, they were healthy. When you're 19, 20, 25 years old, sleep isn't that big a deal. It gets there as we get older. But they were telling me they were sleeping better, going to bed earlier, waking up. A couple of them were losing weight
Hmm.
and they weren't trying to. It was just kind of a happenstance. And one of them quit smoking, wasn't trying to quit smoking, just didn't feel like smoking anymore. And a couple of these people stopped listening to the recordings and they started going back to the way they were. So that's always the best evidence. The best evidence isn't necessarily what could possibly be a placebo effect by someone using it and going, "Ooh, this is unusual," and then seeing a difference. The real difference is notice when you stop doing it and you see all the bad habits coming back again.
Yeah, that is interesting. Okay,
Yeah,
well, thank you for clarifying that.
sure.
You were going to lead us into the experience with Dr. Bredesen. And a lot of
Right.
people here in our community have read The End of Alzheimer's or some of his other books, and they're familiar with his work. So this will be fun to hear about.
Yeah. So if you're familiar with the term neural agility, that is the recording that Dr. Bredesen's people found when they were creating Recode in the first place. And it turned out that they gave away a lot of my recordings without me knowing about it. What
Oh.
happened was one of his assistants, I guess, or even Dr. Bredesen himself, discovered my Revitamind website. And when they
Mm.
went there, they contacted my webmaster who cut a side deal without telling me,
Oh dear.
right? So what happened was I had someone call me up. This is like a year or 2 years later. And they asked me for a refund for Revitamind, which is the name of one of the products I have for the brain. And I said, well, sure, I'm happy to refund you, but I didn't even know anyone bought it. See, I couldn't get any doctors, I couldn't get any clinicians or any nurses or any organizations to pay any attention to me. I had done research and research and research on this. It's been in my family, these kinds of cognitive issues, and I was trying to be proactive. But then I couldn't sell anything because no one would listen to me. No one would believe in me. I'm not a neurologist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a legitimate scientist. I'm not trained at Harvard. So I forgot about the website and it was just sitting there. So anyway, Dr. Bredesen found it, liked the program Revitamind, especially the recording in it called Neural Agility, because it helped with stress, it helped with sleep, it helped with anxiety. And these are all problems when it comes to the mind, when it comes to the brain. So many people, especially today, the minute they forget anything, oh my God, am I getting Alzheimer's?
Hmm.
And if I have it, is that like it's like cancer 50 years ago, it was a death sentence. Well, it's not that way anymore, and it doesn't have to be that way anymore. So what happened was when this woman asked me for a refund, I told her, I didn't even know you bought it. I'm happy to refund you, but can you tell me how you got it? Yeah, I got it from Dr. Bredesen's membership site. He was giving it away. This is like my life's type of work here, and it's being given away, and I don't even know. So she got me in touch with the CFO, and I basically left a voicemail message saying, I'm the creator of this Revitamind system, and you guys are giving it away, and I don't even know how long you've done it for, but you don't have the rights to do this. I have the IP. Intellectual property is mine and nobody else's. Half an hour later, I got a phone call from the CFO, and then I got a call from Dr. Bredesen. I did an hour and a half interview with him, and I can use him in my marketing now. So a lot of people have been helped because of Dr. Bredesen's guy stealing from me, basically. But he didn't steal from me because he thought it was legitimate. It was my webmaster that was stealing from both of us.
Mm.
But it just goes to show you that something that you can perceive as negative can often actually be something positive, and it depends how you look at it. When I got back to them, they were trying to figure out how much money they owed me. I called them back and I said, I have a solution and I don't want you to pay me a dime. I wanted to be able to quote his information in the book about neural agility. I wanted to be able to interview him and use that too. And that's all I asked for. And they said, sure, thank you. There's always a way. If we're so what it taught me was there's an experience in life. We get scares, we get issues, we get this, we get that. But if we look at it as something horrible, we don't learn anything. We become defensive. Everything is bad. When we interpret things as bad, we do this. We close our ears, we close our eyes, we guard ourselves. But if we look at it instead as perhaps it's an experience that's going to teach us something, that can change the whole experience. Maybe everybody who has, like, I just read some research on Alzheimer's. I wish I could remember what it's called now, but they're talking about a pill that might be available this soon that might be able to actually freeze Alzheimer's at whatever stage it's at, halt its progress completely. You know, the point is that there's so many people doing so much good work out there. And if you involve yourself in your health and in your cure and in your safety and in your really intentional self, there's research out there. I think Eric will agree with me, although I shouldn't be speaking for him, but that points out that people who take responsibility for themselves, who take an active role in their healing, an active role in their health, tend to have better outcomes than those who don't. And that's one of the things that brainwave entrainment has allowed me to do. It's allowed me to actually get better outcomes because I just don't panic. I don't freak like I used to. It's the weirdest thing. I even catch myself not freaking out sometimes, which in itself would make me freak out. Why am I not freaking out about this? And I'm still not freaking out. And I believe it's because of the entrainment. And I can tell you that if I go a few days without it, I'm not the same person I am when I'm with it.
Hmm.
So I encourage everybody to do things like this and to help themselves and to help others. Share information you get and don't be afraid to look stuff up. Don't be eyes closed, ears closed. Keep the eyes open and the ears open because you'll be amazed at the kind of opportunities and possibilities that I believe are waiting for all of us if we're open to receiving them. That's the thing, right? We have to be open to receiving them. And I think everybody who's on a call like this and who works with Eric knows that you're already most of the way there because you are working with your eyes open and your ears open. And you do believe there's hope and you do believe there's a way. And you know what? You guys are all pioneers. You should feel amazing about this. You're pioneers. Your experience is going to save lives of people you don't even know, and you'll never know. That's what I believe.
Thank you, Morry. I think you've just shared some significant gold nuggets about life in general and how to deal with hard things. We all have setbacks in life. And I couldn't agree more that it's not exactly what happens to us, it's how we frame it, how we choose. It's about the story that we choose to tell ourselves about what it means. There are some really good additional comments and questions in the chat. So let's take some time with those. Rochelle says, "How do we find the entrainment tones that you've created?" You've hinted at the fact that you've got a site, you create tracks to help people all over the place. They can access it. At the end of this, we're going to talk about a trial that we want to do with our members where people free of charge can have access to some tracks that were custom designed just for all of you here in our AmFast community. So I'm excited to tell you about that as we get to the end of it. But overall, Morry, how do you work with people? How do they find you and how do they access your work?
So most people find me just by word of mouth for the most part. I'm not, a household name yet, but I'm heading there. Uh, you know, most of my work is not customized. It's generalized to a specific audience. So I have things for peak performance in sports. I even have peak performance in pickleball or in business or in sales. I have systems for confidence and self-esteem, general self-help, which is kind of like an umbrella program for everything, um, relationships, wealth, and well-being. I mean, pretty much anything, like I said before, the brain is the central processing unit of your life. If it doesn't pass through your brain, you don't know what's happening. So, because of that, and because I target the brain, that the idea is to treat it like a muscle. And if you go to a health club and you do sit-ups and push-ups and you jog and you lift weights, that doesn't mean in a year all you can do is lift more weight or jog more. It means those muscle groups, whatever they can possibly do, they will now do better and more efficiently. I treat the brain like a muscle. And my theory and my belief is that if we can get that muscle stronger, then anything it does, which let's face it is everything, is likely to get more efficient and stronger as well and easier. So
Nice.
that's the thing. I've got a lot of products. I've been doing this, my research for over 45 years, and I've been doing products since 2007. So I've been at this a while. But the real beauty is when I got in touch with Eric and we talked a few times, I have new technologies. I'm always developing new ways of doing things. That's why I call myself a brainwave entrainment engineer and the only one on planet Earth, because I don't just do binaural beats like everybody else does or isochronic tones. I've actually designed my own tones, which are as strong as isochronic, but as easy on the nervous system as monaural or even binaural beats are. And they were designed specifically for this, specifically for you folks. And that's what Eric will get into. I know he didn't want me to say anything about it earlier, but just to let you know, I'm always designing new and innovative ways of doing things. There's lots of other techniques and technologies that, assuming things go well, we can be releasing in the future to help people to help themselves even more. And remember something, this is you helping yourself. I can design the most important, the most brilliant, the most whatever. If you let it sit on your computer or your phone and you don't use it, then it's just gathering cyber dust. Your decision to be here, your decision to associate with Eric's group, your decision to take action means you have all the power. You're not at the whim of anybody else or anything else. You have the power because you're here, because you've decided to do something about this, to educate yourselves, to learn. And that's what it's really about. Because ultimately, we're all here for a limited period of time. No matter how healthy we are, no matter how ill we are, whatever. It doesn't matter. We're only here for a short time. Let's optimize it. Let's make it as pure as possible, as enjoyable as possible. That's why happiness feels good, right? We've all felt happy. We've all felt sad. Sad feels bad because you're not supposed to feel that way. That's why nature made it feel that way. Happiness feels good. That's why nature made happiness feel good.
I
So
think you'll
there's,
you'll find when you talk, Morry, about optimizing things that you're very much preaching to the choir. That is the one of the key messages here to Mind for All Seasons. Ty brings up a really good question. He has a David Delight Pro that he's been experimenting with, and he says, "What's the comparative value of entrainment sessions when completely relaxed physically and mentally versus while doing other activities like reading a book or browsing the news or reading emails or light exercise?" Can you speak to the difference between those states?
Sure. So there's advantages and benefits to doing entrainment, period. As a matter of fact, I even created some music called AIM, affirmational inspirational music. And I have a version that is just the music and a version that has a 10 hertz alpha frequency embedded within it. So you have lots of competing sounds like music and singing and instruments and all this stuff. But the embedded frequency of 10 hertz still has a purpose and it still has an effect. So the effect is going to be much more subtle, but it also doesn't require you to be so focused on nothing else. So it's not going to be as strong because there's more competition. The neurons, it's all about something called the frequency following response, the frequency following response. So what that is that's the same thing that made you bop your head and tap your toes when you were listening to music. So when you are following a frequency, it's easier to follow a frequency that is just the frequency than a lot of other noise. Imagine I'm in on stage, and for some reason you all wanted to come hear what I had to say, and you're all very quiet and listening. It's going to be very easy for you to understand what I'm saying. Very easy. Now imagine you've come to hear what I'm saying, but no one else is interested and they're all talking. So now I'm talking from stage, but hundreds of people are talking around you as well. It's going to be a much more convoluted signal. You're not going to have an easy time hearing what I'm doing. You're not going to get the benefit out of listening to what I'm saying because you're straining too hard to hear my voice above the noise. That's what entrainment is like with other, with other stimulation involved. That being said, it can still be very effective if it's paired with, say, positive affirmations, positive hypnosis or meditation scripts that help to guide people. So there's a situation. How many of you have ever been, maybe you can wave your hands, how many of you have ever been in a situation where somebody introduced you to someone they saw on the street or whatever, or at a party or at a dinner, and 2 seconds later you don't remember their name? Yeah, I think we can all say that's happened to us. That's why I use it as an example. There is a state of the brain called long-term potentiation. If your brain is in that state, it's not a chemical, it's an actual state of being. If you're in that state, your brain can form neural pathways, memory pathways. If you're not in the state, it goes in one ear and out the other. So now you know, without putting on an EEG, that when you were introduced to Joe, and now you don't remember Joe's name, you were not in the state of LTP, long-term potentiation. That is an example of entrainment because what we do is, in some of my recordings, I entrain you to that frequency. So if you want to learn, for instance, learning might be easier if you have that state active, because then all of a sudden you're in this state of receptivity where your brain can actually process and create neural pathways to that information. Now, I'm of the belief, and I have no evidence to back me up here, but I'm of the belief that if you put yourself into that state and you then, learn good things, happy thoughts, happy things, then you're literally creating neuronal pathways to happy thoughts and happy things, giving your brain more options. It's kind of like a GPS in your car, like Google Maps or Apple Maps. If there's a rock slide on the highway, Google Maps or Apple Maps will tell you there's a problem up ahead, but don't worry, you can take this street. The trick is the street has to be there. And that's what entrainment helps to do, as far as I'm concerned. Helps to build the alternate routes so that when you need them, they can be chosen. And that's part of the whole process. So the process is, yes, you can use it with other distractions, but it won't be as strong. Does that mean you shouldn't use it with other distractions? No, not at all. I have students who use this in school when they're studying. They play it in the background. And it's just like, blah, 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 blah. And it's like an air conditioner after a while. After a few minutes, you don't even notice it's there. But it is. And your brain notices it's there because it's not about your perception of the sound. It's actually about the vibration. And the vibration is there. Because if you think about it and you can hear the blah, 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 even lightly in the background, then that means the vibration is being interpreted by the brain as sound, and it's the vibration that creates the entrainment effect. So even though it's not strong, 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 it can be very subtle, and subtle is a nice way to go too.
I love the analogies that you use, Morry, to help make it more accessible. I think that's helpful. And I think in the process of your last comment, you answered a question that came up in the chat that wondered if you need both the light and the sound to make it work, or can you just listen? And clearly, from what you've said, you can just listen. It can be
Sure.
on in the background, and it will make a difference. It might not make a difference as quickly as if you do more concentrated entrainment, but it still makes a difference.
Yes.
And that leads into some of the other questions here. Rebecca says, well, okay, how can we get started? How do we try entrainment? We want to make it possible for everybody to try entrainment. Morry and I have also had conversations about the fact that many people in our AmFast community are working in, or they own, or they're the administrator of an assisted living or skilled nursing community, where there are lots of older people who would benefit from entrainment, and a lot of staff who are in very stressful situations, and they would also benefit. Imagine going into the break room and having a few minutes of entrainment that just calms your whole system down so that you feel better at work and you're able to be more resilient and more patient. As Morry and I have talked about what it would take to do something like that, he really opened my mind to some new possibilities. For years, Randy and I and our team here at AmFast have helped assisted living and skilled nursing professionals use devices like the David Delight Pro in long-term care settings. But that involves equipment, which is potentially breakable. It involves putting glasses on people who sometimes might not want that. There are some contraindications if you're using light. If someone has a seizure disorder, then we don't have people do that. And when Morry started talking about making customized tracks that are just audio, and the fact that they could be played even on speakers in a room, caused me to start thinking about all of the times in an activity room in a senior living community that people might be sitting around doing something. And if those tracks were playing in the background, there just might be some significant benefit to them that would show up after a couple of weeks of exposure to that. So I talked to Randy about his opinion of this, and he said, no, I think it could really have benefit, and I think it's a very safe thing to try. I don't think there's any risk to trying it at all. So Morry and I discussed this, and he was extremely generous and said, well, why don't I record some custom tracks specifically for people living in long-term care settings and the people taking care of them? And they're also tracks that would benefit anybody. So whether you're just living at home and you're trying to optimize your brain health, or you're trying to improve sleep, or you're trying to have a little bit more energy in the day, or a little bit more sense of calm, or you're serving someone in an assisted living or skilled nursing setting, we want to make available a trial of some tracks that Morry custom designed. And I'm not exactly sure how long this is going to be available, like probably just a month or two. And once the trial period is over and we collect some information from people about what their experiences are and how it goes and what they learn and what benefits they've had from it, then we'll be able to use that in more specific ways to help other people know how this could benefit them. And the idea is that we'll make these available in the documents and resources part of our membership site. Um, I, I believe by Monday, Jeff is working on this right now, and I believe by Monday it should be available that you can go in and you can try out a bunch of different audio tracks. And there are even some things for the staff that have a visual component that can just be accessed on your cell phone through the membership app or on the computer, and you'll be able to listen. You could play it over speakers. You could play it on your phone. It would work best if you had speakers over the ear. That would be the most active entrainment. But I'm excited that we can do this. Morry, what would you add to what we've tried to put together here as sort of a community experiment?
Yeah. So the first thing I'd like to just clarify, you can't listen to it over your phone. Your phone can play it, but
Uh,
your speakers on your phone do not create enough power for the vibration to have an effect. So you got to use headphones with the phone. But you can use an external speaker, like for instance, something like this. That's all you need.
okay,
Something nice and easy.
excellent.
Yeah, as far as the recordings are concerned, they were designed specifically to be played ambiently or with headphones. So the idea would be to initially start off the residents with the ambient exposure. And in the documentation, I tell people what to look for. So you guys know what to look for if you're using it in a setting and how to use it and exactly what states we take the people into and why we're doing it. Everything is very well explained. I don't want anyone to be guessing or to not know what they're dealing with. But that's what it is. The systems were designed because Eric told me the pain points. And the biggest pain points were the residents are not happy. And that annoyed me to hear that because this is a different phase of life. It is not the end of life. And it was important for me that we give them the kind of neurochemistry through the frequency following response where they could experience different chemistry, like I did when I was depressed and suddenly I felt good for a few minutes. When they see that it's not done and they can feel differently, that will change a lot of things. So they're designed to work ambiently and then to graduate later on for those who want a stronger effect to actually be used laying down or sitting with head support and headphones, because that will be the ultimate effect. You don't need light. Light is great. Those David Delights are amazing. I actually have, just to show you how much of a fan of David I am, this is called the Paradise XL. He hasn't made this in like 20 years or more. I love David's work. He's amazing. He taught me what I needed to know to be able to create what I create today. So I am so grateful to him. But I decided because when I was designing my system for myself, I had no money. People wanted thousands of dollars for cures for depression and for feeling bad, and I couldn't afford it. So I wanted to create something that had the technology built into the recording itself as opposed to built into a device. All you need is an ordinary pair of headphones and somewhere to play it. That's it. Literally 10 bucks. Most people have smartphones, so they don't need anything else. But the bottom line here is that light is nice, but light can also be overstimulating. And especially in a senior facility, you don't want to overstimulate because that can be actually obtrusive. It can be angry. It can make people angry. It can kind of bring on the wrong result. So that's why I go for the audio. And audio is strong. You'd be surprised at the differences you feel. I'm still fascinated by how I feel after I run this session. And like I said, I listen 3 or 4 times a day, and I've been doing that for decades now.
Well, after 40 years of living in a really dark place, I can see why it still would fascinate you to be in such a different place. And
Yeah,
what a blessing that is, and what a blessing you are to so many people, Maury.
I
Um,
appreciate that.
there are a couple of other things that we should talk about. We'll hang on for a few extra minutes here and make sure that people's questions get answered. But Connie brought up the question of, hey, will this entrainment principle counteract the problems from light and sound waves from LED lights? You know how some people, like my mom is someone who falls into this category. If she goes into a shopping center that uses certain types of artificial lights, she'll get the worst headache and her brain will just kind of shut down. It's a terrible experience for her. Some people are very sensitive to this. Do you have any
Yeah.
experience or opinion, Maury, about how entrainment might be helpful in a context like that?
Well, especially audio entrainment doesn't really have, I've never heard and I've never seen any literature that says anyone who's ever listened to audio only entrainment has ever experienced a seizure, even people with seizure disorders. It's usually the flickering of light. And a lot of people don't know this, but fluorescent lighting, which is more common in malls, especially older malls, they flash between 60 to 100 times a second.
Hmm.
So you don't perceive it, but it's there. And that could cause all kinds of effects in all kinds of people. So the thing is that I don't think it really matters when it comes to audio. Audio is safe. It's really, really, really safe. And the idea is don't listen at a loud volume. Conversational. So whatever volume you're hearing mine and Eric's voice at, that's pretty much the volume that you want to listen at. One thing you should know though is this technology has been known to bring up repressed or otherwise undealt with issues. So if you lost a doggy when you were 5 years old and you saw it get run over, and someone talks to you about it today and it makes you upset or agitated or angry, that tells you you haven't dealt with it. When I talked about my suicide attempts and about all my injuries, you probably heard there was no emotional attachment because I've more or less dealt with it. But that's the trick. So if you're the kind of person that you know you get agitated when someone talks about something or makes you think about something that you're uncomfortable with, it means that you haven't dealt with it. This technology can bring that up. Now, that's not a bad thing. It's like a cyst. You don't want to let a cyst just keep building up the poison inside. You want to drain it. But that being said, if you notice yourself getting a little upset, a little angry, whatever, while you're listening, just stop listening until you feel back to your normal. And once you get to your normal, try it again at a lower volume because volume acts like a gas pedal for this stuff. So imagine driving down a beautiful country road at 30 miles an hour. It's beautiful. You can see all the trees, all the flowers, the deer, the antelope, everything. Are there antelope? Anyway, it came to my mind, so I said it. But that's the thing, right? So now drive down the same road at 130 miles an hour. Well, now you're just too busy trying to keep the car on the road. You don't notice anything. That's the trick with this. Yes, you can listen louder, and yes, it'll be stronger. But is it going to help you? Probably not. That's why I say a nice, comfortable volume is always the best way to go, because that's kind of like your brain telling you this is the therapeutic volume to listen at. Listen to yourself. You know better than I know. You know better than anybody knows about you. The trick is to keep your mind open and not give away your power, because you can't really give away your power. But if you feel like you have, then you don't realize you have any, and you're just not using it. So don't give away your power. Listen, get educated, follow the things that make sense to you and that if they show brings results. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to work so badly with Eric and his group. Because honestly, I'm very, very, very impressed with what they do. And to even be this far and associated, I'm honored. But these
Well,
guys know what they're doing and they have honest compassion. I think you do this, Eric, because you want to do it because you want to help make a difference in people's lives. And that is the ultimate motivator.
1,000%. Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
for the nice compliment, and it goes both
you're
ways.
welcome. Thank you.
Um, I know that Gabriella has a question that we need to get to, and I know that some people might have to jump because we're a little bit over the hour. Let me just show one thing so that people are aware of what's going to come up by Monday. So there should be a link on the membership site under the resources, and it will take you to a landing page that will look like this. And you'll notice that the language is specifically geared toward assisted living and skilled nursing operators. Because one of the things that we're trying to do is experiment with this in long term care settings to really benefit the residents and the staff. And there's an explanation of what entrainment is and who it's for and what research shows about this and what's included in the trial. You'll notice there are 3 caregiver protocols and 4 resident protocols, and there are implementation guides, and you will be able to stream the tracks. You'll be able to just click a button and play it through your headphones or another speaker. And you can do this in a room for residents in long-term care. You could do it in a break room for staff. But many of you on the call today are living at home and you're interested for yourself or for yourself and a loved one. This is for you too. You can absolutely use this and try this. But when you get to the page that says Brainwave Entrainment Trial, we want to know who's using it so that we can follow up with you and get feedback. And under facility name, if you're at home, just type in home. And that's okay. And we know our members, we know who you are, and and we'll be excited to talk to you about this. So just be aware of that's how you're going to be able to access this for a trial period. And then if things go well, then we'll make a way for this to be available to you at very nominal expense, or there may even be a way to just roll it into your membership. We're still working out the details with that, but the first step is to try it and see how it goes for people and see if it's of value. And if it adds significant value to you, we will find a way to make it available long term at very little money so that it's accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so that said, Morry, did I miss anything before we go to Gabriella's question?
No, I think people have been very patient. They should be able to ask their questions now.
Okay. We've answered a lot of questions as we've gone along.
Sure.
So thank you everybody for dropping your questions in the chat. That's been really, really valuable. Gabriella, you said you had another question.
Yes, so this is such a fascinating topic, and Eric, thank you for inviting Mr. Morry Zelcovitch. What is your background, Mr. Where's that last name from?
Originally from Poland.
Poland. Okay, wonderful. So I really, this is such a fascinating topic, and I believe it's the direction the world is going towards in healing. I have a couple questions. One, I'm trying a wearable sound frequency called the Wave Watch, and I was told that I don't have to hear the vibrations, and it has vibrations for different ailments, for different body parts. And you mentioned that it's important to hear the vibrations. Now, can you clarify that for me? That would be my first question.
So you don't hear vibrations. The
Or
vibrations
the
get translated into sound
sound.
if
Okay,
they're transmitted through the air. This is being transmitted probably through your wrist.
right.
So
It's a watch.
Yeah, I'm not really very, do you feel it vibrating?
No, no. It's very
Okay,
low.
so
It's very low. It has 1 through 5 volume, but they say you should not hear it. If I put it to 5 and I lay it down, I could hear it.
right. But you don't feel it on your skin.
No, no. Mm-mm.
Well, honestly, I don't know enough about the product to make an educated, reasonable
Mm-hmm.
assessment. So I would say if you're using it, like for anything like that at all, it's innocuous. It's not going to hurt you.
Right,
If they
right.
offer a money back guarantee and it helps you, wonderful. If it doesn't help
Mm-hmm.
you, give it back. That would be my
Okay.
suggestion.
I've heard a friend of mine actually recommended, and she's a military scientist and had treated herself with, got rid of cancer. She's very sensitive, and she said, I notice a
Good.
difference. So that that having said, thank you for that.
Good.
Can you also explain, since you are, you mentioned learning under a state of receptivity. Um, that we would be able to hear or perceive better. Could that also, is there any relation between the left brain and the more, our left brain and right brain being more interconnected for that? And then a time of day, for example, people wake up and pray early in the morning or at midnight where there's less noise. Does that make any sense with what we're talking about today, or it confirms?
Well, it's really with this type of technology, it's more a matter of it doesn't really matter when you use it. In the beginning, it's best not to use it like an hour before you go to sleep in case it hyper energizes you. You need to understand what it's going to do. So, best around the middle of the day, late morning, would
Mm,
be the best times to probably use it initially.
mhm.
Uh, the thing is, there's something called the potassium sodium ratio in the brain.
Okay.
And most people notice around 2 to 3 o'clock, they start feeling kind of lethargic and low energy. That's because
Mhm.
of the sodium potassium ratio being out of balance. And
Mm,
listening to a theta recording tends to rebalance it. At least
mm,
that's what the research shows. So there's various recordings, but time of day doesn't really matter as much as listening the same time in the same place is usually the best. And that's not because of any functional benefit, it's because it makes it easier to be a habit. And ultimately, doing 10 sit-ups today is a good start, but if you don't do it again, it's not going to give you any benefit. So listening to a recording today and tomorrow is a good start, but if you stop listening, you're not going to get any benefits. Or not likely to get, certainly no long-term benefits anyway.
Mm-hmm. Now, entrainment is also the law of entrainment could apply to positive and negative. From what I understand, we could people can entrain by being enraged together, going to protest something that would be negative, not necessarily negative, but it's true that we can entrain whether it's positive or negative, correct?
To me, positive and negative is a state of mind and a conclusion when an individual draws. So
Mm-hmm.
I was negative for 40 years. I'm not negative anymore. I don't see positive and negative. That's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a physiological result of an entrainment frequency. I can tell you, I used to live in an apartment building and they were repairing all of the balconies and they would start work at like 6 in the morning and I would wake up miserable because of hammering and sawing and drilling and all
Mm-hmm.
those discordant sounds. But I can tell you now, I wake up, I run a session. As soon as I wake up, I feel like I'm floating on cloud nine. So different sounds definitely have an effect. And
Very
discordant sounds, which isn't really entrainment because there's benefits to having entrainment and there's benefits to not having entrainment
right.
and the type of entrainment, but it's not really a matter of good or bad.
Yeah,
Okay. That okay makes sense. I would have to
great
go
insight.
back. Yeah, thank you. I'll have to go back and re-listen because I didn't hear the whole story, but I really appreciate you sharing your story, your life story
Oh,
with
thank
us.
you.
That's very special. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And
That's it. Thank you.
Gabriella, it would be fun to hear how your residents do
Yeah,
with
I'm curious.
entrainment.
I would love to try it. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we hope that you'll try it and give some feedback. That would be very helpful in developing these next generation tools to help older adults.
Absolutely. I love the new tools that are coming out on the market.
Great.
Coming out. Thank you.
It's a
All right.
nice world we live in.
We've got time maybe for one last question. If anybody else has a question that we haven't addressed already. Okay. Well, hearing none, we covered a lot of ground today, Morry. That was so helpful. Thank you very much for your time and your generosity, and especially for the work that you put into making those tracks with all the special tones that are specifically geared for this audience. I'm really excited to hear how it goes as people test drive this.
Yeah, me too. Thank you very much. And I appreciate everybody who's here and who is watching this on a replay too. Thank you for being here and thanks for having an open mind and wanting to have a healthier mind.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again
Be
for another
well.
masterclass next week. All
Have a
right. Bye
happy
for
and
now.
healthy every day.
Thanks, Morry. You too.
Thanks.